even if our circumstance isn't quite what we want it to be, we can live with joy and peace and hope. And even when I was super sick, and even on the lowest of days where it did feel hopeless, I can remember just being so thankful that I knew God would never leave or forsake me, and I had his hope and I had his joy no matter what. So I would just encourage people to really cling to him during this time, especially if they're going through it. You're going to get through it, so don't give up.
I'm happy to welcome Jamie Jamgochian to the podcast today. Jamie is a worship leader currently living in the Nashville area, and she's just released a brand new album called All Things, and I'm really excited to dig into some of the stories behind this new record. So welcome with me to the podcast, Jamie Jamgochian.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as I was doing a little bit of digging, the first thing that stood out to me on your bio is that you're a Berklee School of Music graduate.
Yes, I am.
That means you have some mad music skills.
I hope so. It was my dream college, the only one I applied for, the only one I wanted to go to. And I remember finding out my senior year of high school, I checked the mail Christmas morning, so clearly I didn't check it the day before, right?
Right.
And there was my acceptance letter to Berklee, and it was just the sweetest little gift from God, and it was a real influential place for me to be because it's actually where I came to faith. But yeah, I studied jazz piano, I studied voice a little bit, songwriting, professional music degree, so I loved it.
So what were you hoping to do at that point? I know you accepted the Lord in college, but what were you hoping to do with your music degree? Was the plan always to be a performer?
Yeah, I love jazz music, and I would play in the bars and the cruise lines, my funny Valentine,
Yep.
sweet comic Valentine, and all of that. And I just thought I'd be a professional musician. I had taught piano. I had done session work, a vocalist for sessions. Had been in some ensembles that traveled a bit, got to sing background for some pretty cool artists at Berklee that would come through. So yeah, be a songwriter. That was always kind of what I felt called to and what brought me life and purpose. But it definitely had a greater meaning and a greater purpose when I came to know the Lord,
Right.
and then wanted to not only just sing and write music, but really spread his hope and love through song.
So talk a little bit about how you became a Christian. I mean, it was from somebody who shared with you, correct?
Yeah. So I grew up, I want to make sure I get this right. I grew up in a family that believed in God. We weren't agnostic, or I can remember I would even pray as a little girl. And I really believe I was drawn to things of the Spirit at a very young age. I would play the piano and just sense God's presence and his peace and love and joy. And kind of we were taught to be good people, make good decisions, be loving and kind and morally, correct. And, this kind of good works-based faith, which is really exhausting. I don't know how people do that. I'm
Right.
so glad Jesus came to set us free from the law.
Yeah.
So it was my senior year of college, and, just living the college girl life. And I think for me, it was my first time I had, moved out of the home and was on my last year of school. And you really start asking what you believe and why you believe it. And there are a lot of different religions at Berklee. And I was introduced to a lot of them through different classmates. And I can remember I just was going through kind of a hard time. It was probably a breakup or something silly. Now that I look back, I'm like, oh, that was nothing compared to real life, girl.
Yeah.
But it was
right?
a 21-year-old problem, whatever that looked like.
Yeah.
And I can remember I was searching and I was asking questions like, God, if you're real, I want to know you. And I, had met people that were in this gospel choir at our school. And there was a Christian fellowship group that my ex-boyfriend would always take me to. And I was so drawn to the music. I think he knew that. I loved the gospel music. And I just had kind of hit rock bottom in some ways. And I went to a class, and in the songwriting class, you get to, try out your songs on your classmates,
Sure.
and the professor kind of grades them and, critiques you and whatnot. And for whatever reason that week, I was really searching, and I had written a song, and the bridge said, God has given us the strength to be who we are. So don't give up. Don't ever give up. And I remember it like yesterday, because I remember just thinking like, God, I don't want to just live for the American dream of like success, money, a nice house with a white picket fence, a dog, and 2 kids, and an awesome husband. Like I knew there was more in my heart, and I think, you hear that phrase a lot as cheesy and Christianese as it sounds, but like there really is a void, like a God-given void, right, in our hearts until we know the author and creator of life and the one that made us and fashioned and formed us. And I was searching, and this beautiful classmate, she's one of my best friends now, she came over. She was super Southern from Florida, like deep Florida.
Okay.
And did not fit into the typical like Berklee looking crowd. And I mean, I was not a Christian, like I was not redeemed in any of the sense. I had a potty mouth. I was doing all the things,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember she came over and was just like, do you know Jesus? Like that song was so beautiful. And do you know how much he loves you? And have you been born again? And I'm like, what in the world? Are you part of one of those cults? Like I was so afraid. I thought she was in like a cult or something.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, she had more joy and peace and love than anyone I'd ever met. And she just so beautifully shared the gospel with me, who Jesus is. She gave me my first Bible, and I was like, what do I do with it? Put it under my bed at night to sleep better? I mean, I had no clue. She's like, why don't you like start with the Gospel of John and just ask before you read it? Just be like, Jesus, show me who you are. She was just so real. And that's what I love about Christianity, and I think some people complicate it and make it something that it was never meant to be. And so I did that, and she was the one that I can remember calling her up and being like, I think I want to know Jesus. And, I wouldn't have known to pray a prayer to invite him in my heart or anything like that, a salvation prayer, but she led me through that. And it was just a quick change. I remember just the things that I once desired, like God changing my heart for his ways and his purposes. And so then I wanted to sing about him. So I started writing my little Christian songs that were probably so bad back in the day. And I knew like one Bible scripture, and here I am like, okay, I'm going to be a Christian artist. And God's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
So he led me from Boston to Seattle, where I interned at an awesome church, kind of did like a 2-year Bible college after I had graduated at the City Church in Kirkland, Washington. It was the best experience ever. And just really grew in my faith there and in leadership and my purpose and my calling. And then I got a record deal and moved to Nashville. So it's been such a cool, really beautiful just picture of how God can take anyone. Like our past does not determine our future, and at any time change us and make us who he wants us to be. And this life with Jesus is for sure the most fulfilling I've ever known.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of my testimony. And the coolest part is my mom and my dad came to know the Lord after I did. They were in like their mid-50s, and they are like on fire for God right now. They inspire me. Like God is using them so much in my life now. So it's just a neat testimony of how God can get a hold of your heart.
So I'm just kind of curious, going back to your friend, had nobody come to you previously to share the gospel, or was it just that something that she said or the way she said it made it appealing and attractive to you?
I mean, I was in Sunday school every Sunday at a congregational church. I never heard the gospel there. And I would go to mass sometimes with my dad. I just had never heard the simplicity of the gospel preached, that Jesus died for you. He loves you. He's taken all of your past, present, future sins upon the cross. If you accept him into your heart, ask for forgiveness, turn towards him, follow him. Like I had never heard that until I was 21. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it. My ex had shared a little bit here and there, but that was not a God glorifying relationship in any way. And so I was kind of drawn to things of the Lord, and I think he could tell that. I think God knew, like there was always this pull towards towards the things of the Spirit. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for that classmate and her boldness. I feel
Yeah.
like Christians aren't as bold these days. I don't know. And I'm just so grateful that she was just so in love with her Savior that she was like, Jesus loves you. Like she knew what was going on in my
Yeah.
life. And she was just, God has a better way. And like, he's not mad at you. And you can be forgiven right now. And, it was
Yeah.
just so real and relatable. And she's like, we're similar. We're both fun and funny. And sure, we follow the ways of God, but we're not too serious. And, it was the perfect person at the
Yeah.
perfect time.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the reason of my asking that is, and you kind of touched on it, is the fact that it may not be some serious evangelist or something like that that's going to help reach people around us. The importance to be bold in our faith, even now, of just saying something simple. Hey, do you know Jesus? And
Yeah.
that can be the key to open a door to somebody who may be searching, may not even know they're searching, but it's just that nudge that they needed to get over the edge.
Absolutely. And I think about that all the time because I mean, I have friends from all different walks of life. And sometimes I'm even like, I need to be more bold and just kind of share things when they say something that I totally don't agree with, or I'm like, oh, I wish they understood. And part of me is like, maybe nobody's really shared with them the way my friend did in college, and so they're just looking at this life of faith and Christianity from one
Hmm.
viewpoint, but don't really know the full gospel. And I don't know, sometimes I get a little grieved at how I love local church. Oh my gosh, thank God for the local church. It's
Yeah.
how I make my living,
Right.
singing in different churches. But sometimes I think people confuse church with Jesus.
Mm.
And the biggest thing, and yes, it's awesome to be plugged into a local church. We need that. But the biggest thing is knowing him and his heart and who he says you are and what his word says.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't expect us going here on this podcast.
Well, the thing that's really impressing me these days is the fact that the Bible doesn't talk about the church as four walls. The
Right.
Bible talks about church as people and relationship with people, being in community with people. That's what the gospel's about. And spreading that
Absolutely.
gospel is being in circles with people who may not believe Jesus. And so how do we rub shoulders with those people? We have to get outside of the four walls.
Mm, so true. And you're like, even with COVID, like, I think this is the greatest time for the church to be the church. Like, if your church isn't open, it's okay. Go hang out at somebody's home and make dinner and talk about what God's teaching you, or have a little worship time together, or just
Yep.
hang out. And like, this is the time for us to truly be the church as individuals who love God,
Yeah.
no matter what, no matter what's taken away from us. I got to do Sean Foot's Hold the Line, Let Us Worship
Mm.
event here in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And it was phenomenal to see thousands. I mean, I think they said there are about 10,000 people that were just so ready to come together that, a lot of their churches had been closed for the last 6 months and were
Yeah.
just so ready to come together, to stand as one and worship God. And you could just feel like it was family. It was unity. It was family coming together saying, no matter what, you know what, no matter what the government does, no matter what might happen in our world, you can't take away somebody's belief and
Right.
faith and love
Right.
for Jesus and worship. And it really spurred something on in me to not worry about what things are going to look like in the coming days, but just
Mm-hmm.
to stay true to who God's called you to be.
Yeah. That's rich. That's beautiful. Well, and I think that community, and I'm hoping that this is part of your story, and we'll find out here in a minute, but I think that community is something that we've got to invest in now, because there will come times in people's life in that community or in our own lives where we need to pour into or be poured into by our community.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know where I would be today had I not had good community in my life in this last season.
Well, let's talk about that last season, because that, I think, kind of shaped this new album that's come out, right?
Yeah, it really, really did.
So back in 2018, you had a fairly significant event that kind of put the brakes on your career, so to speak.
Yeah. So I had navigated something called Lyme disease for a good bit and I had gone to some doctors and I thought I had it under control with like holistic treatments. And um, unfortunately, most of the doctors I saw were all like doom and gloom. Like, once you have this, you'll always have this. It was just not very hope filled. And I can remember reading scriptures where I'm like, but Jesus heals. And I'm
Hmm.
like, if Jesus could heal the people in the Bible, Jesus can heal me. Like, that's just where
Yeah.
my faith is, right? I rather die believing for something and hope than like get bitter and think it's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to go to my grave believing no
Yeah.
matter what, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, but in 2018, I helped a beautiful new church plant in Nashville, Pastors Alex and Henry Seeley, the Belonging Co. is part of their just the team that, some of the first that gathered with them before the church was even the church that it is now. And so I had eventually gone on staff there and really loved that. Was working as a pastor there and still traveling, doing some women's events, singing, still writing. Had kind of given up on some dreams with music. I had bought into some lies that I was too old or my voice was dated or blah, blah, blah. They don't need another worship leader, blah, blah, blah. Lies from the pit of hell. But when I think, and I also think like if we don't take care of our soul and some emotions that I was probably stuffing down with some just desires of the heart that hadn't been met yet or fulfilled and prayers that hadn't been answered, I think I had too much of like I'll just push it aside. I'll be fine. It'll happen when it happens instead of like dealing with my heart in those areas. So I think it was a whole bunch of things.
Hmm.
But my body finally just had enough of navigating that Lyme disease. And what happened, if I understand it correctly from the clinic I went to that I then found my healing at, is it became neurological, like a neurological Lyme disease
Oh.
infection. And that's when like my nervous system shut down, headaches like you cannot even imagine, like fatigue, couldn't function. I had to leave my beautiful life and condo in Nashville and move home to be with my parents in Boston at my age. Talk
Hmm.
about a hard, humbling season. And I
Yeah.
love them. It just wasn't part of the plan. I was
Right.
like, go, 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 girl, on the road, friends, traveling, loving my life,
Yeah, sure.
successful, blah, blah, blah. Um, and that began one of the lowest seasons of my life of trying to navigate how to get healed. It just brought me to some dark, dark places. But thank God for friends and community that would text and call and pray and check in. And thank God for finding a clinic that knew how to properly treat it. And yeah, here we are a year and a half later. And I never thought I would have released an album. But during that time, I kept hearing the Lord say, "You're not finished yet. You're not finished yet." And so I knew when I was on the other side of this, I needed to release a new album, which is why we called it All Things, based off of God will work all things for our good.
So because you moved from Nashville where your physical community was back home to where you had some familial support. What did that community look like? You said texting and so forth, but did that community follow you or did you have to find new community?
I really didn't. I was very sick. I was not leaving the house. It was a really low point. Thank God for my mom and dad, my sister. Yeah, it was just all through phone calls and stuff like that. I would watch church services online. Our church already was doing online streaming before COVID. They always do that. And so they were already doing that. And so, yeah, I mean, it probably was the most isolated I had been in a long time. And that was hard. And I think the enemy played off of that as well. But I do think community is so important.
And so you had these friends from Nashville and maybe even still from Seattle that were calling and encouraging and supporting and praying, even though they weren't able to be physically present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I found that's very true in my life is that it's easy when I get into problems. It could even be things that I'm not physical necessarily, but emotional or stresses or financial that I tend to withdraw into myself. And those are the times that I need to be even more faithful about maintaining my community. And sometimes that is just a phone call, a text, an email, or something that just says, "Hey, I'm alive, I'm here, and I rely on you.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, sometimes we have to reach out. They're not always going to reach out to us, right?
Exactly.
I think that it shows great character and a humble heart when you can reach out to a trusted friend and just say, "I'm not in a good place. Can we talk? Can we pray? Will you laugh with me? Will you cry with me?"
Yeah.
That's humbling sometimes, especially if you are more of a leader type personality. Or for me, I was a pastor at a big church. I had a platform. Like this was the first time I was really needing people in a deep, deep way.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, like I don't ever want to go back to thinking I can do everything on my own because that's not a full life either.
What you're saying kind of makes me think of, before your disease, before this crisis, you were being active, involved in sharing your life with people and that pouring into people. And you still need to do that after, when you're in the midst of this stuff. It's still all about being intentional about being with people.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, even now, I've been traveling so much, which is weird because like the world is shut down. But I was in Boston for the summer, then I was in Seattle, then I'm back to Nashville, then I have some travel dates that have picked up. Like, I'm not able to be at church every week right now, and I'm not able to see people all the time. Work is just, music stuff's been pretty full on, which is awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
thankful. But making sure, like, I know on Monday night I'm getting with two of my closest girls. We're having a night out, girls' night out, or making sure I'm doing things to stay connected on purpose. Um, that has been really crucial in this season for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the album. We know that
Yeah.
all things work together for good, that hence the title, All Things. I think Beautiful Story, isn't that the current single?
Yeah, that's the current radio single.
So talk a little bit about kind of what that impetus behind that song is.
So honestly, I feel like God is always writing the best story over our life, but sometimes there's trials and suffering and hard chapters, right? That we're
Right.
all going to navigate. This life of faith does not promise that everything is like peaches and cream and an apple pie with ice cream on top, although that sounds so good right now. So I think it was just navigating that season, and I wanted to declare his truth that he writes a beautiful story from glory to glory, um, even the in between seasons of life. And the bridge says, all the while you keep saying, trust
Mm.
that I'm custom making everything for good. And I just believed, even when I was as sick and in that dark, low place, I kept sensing that the Lord was like custom making my story. And even the pieces that haven't quite made sense in the natural or things that I'm like, thought you would have done it that way, or I
Mm.
thought things would have looked different by now, Lord. I just have this deep sense that it's going to be so beautiful and it's going to be custom made, and not everything just worked out the way I wanted to. Sure, it would have been probably awesome, but I feel like it's going to hold so much more depth and value
Mhm.
and even be so much more special because it's something I've had to fight for in the spirit and wait on, and that wasn't just my healing, that's other areas of life as well. But so that song really is an anthem of God writing his best story. I always say if it's not good yet, he's not done yet because God makes all things good.
I
So
like
hold
that.
on, don't give up.
I like that. If it's not good yet, he's not done yet.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yeah. Well, another song that kind of strikes with me is the title cut, I would say, is All Things for My Good, because that's just another reminder of, the stuff that I'm going through is meant to shape me and mold me and not just it's the end of the world.
Right. Absolutely. And the stuff that's the thing, like even now in the days we're living in, this is the best opportunity for us to really live what we believe,
Mhm.
And during that hard season, it was the best opportunity for me to see God truly work all things for good. I mean, there were days I couldn't even, like, the goal was to get out of bed, wash my face, maybe make a turkey sandwich. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like it
Yeah.
had gotten really low. And I can now see how the Lord not only healed me physically, but got me back to my true love of ministering in music and worship and making albums and women's events. And even though everything is shut down right now
Sure.
because of COVID, but I can see how he didn't just heal, but he worked it for good and bringing back some things that I thought were gone.
Yeah. When I went through a real tough time in my life earlier on, and I was going with a counselor who was actually a world-class weightlifter.
Oh, wow.
He holds the record for the bench press in the 80-year-old or level. But anyway, he was saying that in the weightlifting world, if you're not hurting, you're not building new muscle. And
Isn't
he
that
equated that to our spiritual life and our emotional life, that a lot of that new muscle comes from the pain or the
mm,
difficulty of dealing with stuff. And so, while it's not fun to go through, it's good to go through.
yeah, that's so good. I couldn't agree anymore. Yep.
So we've got COVID in the way, but what is the future hold for Jamie, and kind of do you see where's God leading for the next chapter of your life?
Well, hopefully I'll get better with the Spotify and YouTube and Amazon Music because this is a whole new world for me. When I put out CDs, people like loved getting the CD,
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
actual album. So I'm learning this new landscape of music, which has been so interesting.
yeah.
So, the album's just about a month out. So still, doing stuff to support that.
Hmm.
And then all the Aspire dates, I'm on a women's tour called Aspire Women's Event. All those dates got canceled in 2020. So hopefully in 2021 now, I got bad news yesterday that my very first one in February in Washington has already canceled because the governor has put them back into a mandatory lockdown with no gatherings in the church over X amount of people.
Yep.
So I am just praying. I'm like, God, I cannot have a repeat of 2020 and 2021. I'm going to need a new job. I'm like, Lord, what do I do? All I've ever done is music and ministry. So that's going to be interesting. Unless I'm a rich husband, and then I can just cook for him every night and be happy.
Well, and then for you, because you went through a lockdown of sorts in 18 because you were trying to recover, and then you're going through another one in 20. It's like, I've got enough of these lockdowns already, Lord.
Absolutely. Yes. So hopefully be touring again. I'm writing my first book, so I
Oh,
don't know. I don't think that will come out until, gosh, at this point, maybe 2022. But that's been fun. I have another album idea already in my heart that I'm hoping to pursue a little bit. And yeah, so I'm just really prayerful that the world opens up and we can start having concerts and events and live music again.
well, you just said something that made me, and this is kind of a step back into more kind of the creativity side of things, but like you said, this album, All Things, was born out of a period of your life. What is it like? And I've never asked an artist this before. What is it like to try to be supporting this stuff that's from your history while you're still trying to look towards the future and do the next thing?
Oh, it's been awesome because I think this album to me is such it shows so much healing for me and like that God did what he said he would do.
Hmm.
And so it's really sweet to be launching this. And yeah, and I think dreaming into the future is still so important. And even though it might not look like what we all want, like we can't stop dreaming about things. And a girlfriend and I were joking the other day about like how hard dating was pre-COVID. And now it's like, okay, this is a whole new challenge, but I'm here for it, Lord. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know. I have one of those kind of fighter spirits that I'm like, okay, if this is what it's going to look like now, let's find a new way to do things then.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for spending time. Is there anything, last thoughts or anything that you want to share with us?
I think just if anyone is in a dark valley like I walked through, whether it be physical illness or something else, emotional or financial, or what's going on right now in our world, the political climate, I think just not to lose hope. I know the enemy would love to come in and whisper, see, God's not good, or see the world's falling apart, but really to ask God for his heavenly perspective. Because when we can get that perspective, even if our circumstance isn't quite what we want it to be, we can live with joy and peace and hope. And even when I was super sick, and even on the lowest of days where it did feel hopeless, I can remember just being so thankful that I knew God would never leave or forsake me, and I had his hope and I had his
Amen.
joy. no matter what. So I would just encourage people to really cling to him during this time, especially if they're going through it. You're going to get through it, so don't give up.
One of the things that we do every Saturday, we send out a newsletter asking our fans and friends to be praying for artists that week. What are some specific things that we can be praying for you in the next weeks and months ahead?
Oh, thank you. I think just for continued healing and health, and that I continue to stay strong and healthy. I've been, ministering again at events and around a lot of people. So just asking the Lord to keep my immune system really strong. And just that things would open up touring wise. And if not, God would show me plan B, because I really don't know what that is at this point. That would be awesome. Thanks for asking.
I'd like to thank Jamie for spending time with us this week. There are a couple of great takeaways from our conversation. One is to be bold in sharing our belief in Jesus with those that are around us. Who knows what would have happened had Jamie's friend not asked her if she loved Jesus? You never really know what kind of an impact will be made for eternity because you shared about your faith. And the second thought that stands out to me is to never give up hope. God is always working, and as it says in the Bible in Romans 8:28, God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I like the way that Jamie said it. She said, if it's not good yet, then God's not done yet. What a great reminder. Well, as the first episode of 2021, I'd like to thank you for joining me again this week. And I really want this podcast to be our podcast. So if you have suggestions of people I should interview or topics that maybe we should cover, I'd love to hear you. Please send your suggestions via direct message on any of the social media sites. Just look for @CCM on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Patreon. Or you can drop me an email directly through my website, christianmusicarchive.com. Your suggestions and input help strengthen this community, so thanks in advance, and I look forward to hearing from you. And until next week, remember this: God loves you. In fact, he's crazy about you.